The rhythmic hum of the Stardust engines gradually shifted pitch as Jake Riley guided his salvage vessel into the docking bay of Xylo's orbital station. Through the viewport, the crystalline structure of the station glittered against the backdrop of the purple-hued planet below. Jake ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair and sighed, checking the damage report one more time. "Another busted hull," he muttered, scanning the inventory list. The asteroid belt he'd spent 3 weeks mining had yielded barely enough or to cover his fuel costs. He needed something valuable and fast. His attention turned to the datapad listing local trade opportunities. One item caught his eye: Xylan crystalline components, particularly the rare indigo variety used in high-end navigation systems. Just one of those could get the Stardust the repairs it desperately needed and leave enough credits for him to take a much-needed break. Jake straightened his worn jacket as the docking procedure completed with a metallic clunk. Right, he told himself. Get in, find a buyer or seller, make the deal, get out. No complications. The station's main concourse bustled with the usual interplanetary traffic. Merchants hawking exotic wares, travelers from a dozen systems, and the ever-present station security personnel. But what caught Jake's attention were the Xylan natives. They moved with an otherworldly grace, their pale violet skin almost luminescent under the station lights. Something about them made the hair on Jake's arms stand on end, a subtle energy field that seemed to pulse around them, resonating with emotions that weren't his own. He shook off the sensation. Alien biology wasn't his concern. Commerce was. Jake made his way toward the trading district, scanning for potential contacts. The commotion caught his attention before he saw its source. Raised voices, the sound of something crashing. Jake rounded a corner and spotted 3 figures in dark attire cornering a slender Xylan female against a maintenance alcove. Their stance was unmistakable to anyone who'd spent time in the rougher parts of space. Predators who'd found prey. The Xylan woman was young. Even Jake could tell that much. She wore elaborate robes of silver and deep purple, now partially torn at the sleeve. One of the assailants held what looked like a data cylinder, while another gripped her arm. "The access codes, little princess," the leader was saying, "or we start removing pretty fingers." Jake hesitated. Not his problem, not his people, not his. The Xylan woman's eyes met his across the corridor, wide with fear, but also with a dignity that refused to bend. Something in those eyes, lavender with flecks of silver, compelled him forward before conscious thought caught up. "Hey," Jake called out, affecting a casual swagger he didn't feel. Station security's doing random contraband sweeps 2 levels down. Thought you might want to know. The distraction worked for a crucial second. The assailants turned, and Jake used the moment to bump into a nearby cleaning drone, sending it careening into the group. As they scrambled to avoid the flailing mechanical arms, Jake lunged forward, grabbed the Xylan woman's hand, and pulled her toward an access corridor he'd noticed earlier. "Maintenance tunnels," he explained as they ran. "Standard design on these stations. Should lead us to the public section." Behind them, shouts and footsteps indicated their pursuers had recovered. "They're Kthar agents," the woman said, her voice melodic despite her breathlessness. "They wanted access to," she stopped herself. "Thank you for your intervention." Jake navigated them through a series of narrow passages, finally emerging into a bustling retail area where they could blend with the crowd. Only when he was certain they'd lost their pursuers did he stop. "Jake Riley." He introduced himself, releasing her hand. "Salvage operator. Lyra Vielor," she replied with a formal half-bow. "I am in your debt, Jake Riley of Earth." Her eyes, up close, were even more striking. There was something about her entire presence that made him feel strangely exposed, as though she could sense his every emotion. It was unnerving, but not entirely unpleasant. "No debt," Jake shrugged. "Just happened to be passing by." "No." Lyra shook her head firmly. "In my culture, such an act of protection creates a bond of gratitude that must be acknowledged." Without warning, she stepped forward, placed her palm against his cheek, her skin cool and tingling against his, and pressed her lips briefly to his. It was barely a kiss, more ceremonial than passionate. But the moment their lips touched, Jake felt an electric current race through his body, as though some invisible connection had just been forged. Before he could recover from his surprise, a sharp tone rang out. Station security officers in crystalline armor surrounded them, their weapons not quite drawn, but clearly ready. Behind them appeared a shimmering hologram of an elderly Xylan male, his robes more elaborate than any Jake had seen. Seal of gratitude, confirmed, the hologram announced, its voice resonating with authority. Recipient, Earth male, identified as Jake Riley. Bestower, Lyra Valor, seventh daughter of the Valor lineage, guardians of the Nexus Core. Jake felt Lyra freeze beside him. By the ancient Covenant and Unity Protection Clause, Section 12.3 of the Xylan Binding Law. The hologram continued. The recipient is hereby legally bound to the entire unbetrothed Valor sisterhood to ensure familial unity and core stability. Wait, what? Jake took a step back, looking between the hologram and Lyra, whose expression had transformed from gratitude to mortification. I didn't, she began, but the hologram cut her off. The ritual has been performed. The bond is recognized. The human will be transported to Xylos for the unification ceremony. Now hold on, Jake protested, backing into the security officers who had moved in behind him. This is clearly a cultural misunderstanding. I'm an Earth citizen. I'm not subject to Xylan law. The hologram's expression remained impassive. Your docking registration included acceptance of Xylan legal jurisdiction during your stay, as stipulated in subsection 47B of the Interplanetary Commerce Agreement. A security officer thrust a datapad toward him, highlighting a tiny block of text Jake had thumbprint without reading. Standard procedure for solo operators like himself who couldn't afford legal teams to review every docking contract. This is absurd, Jake argued. You can't possibly enforce. The seal of gratitude from the youngest daughter of a core guardian lineage is a matter of planetary security, the hologram stated. The human will be escorted to the transport immediately. Two officers took hold of Jake's arms, their grips firm but not painful. He looked desperately at Lyra, whose face had paled to a lighter shade of violet. I didn't know, she whispered. The seal is automatic for my people. I didn't think how it would activate with an offworlder. I'm sorry. As Jake was led toward the station's diplomatic bay, he caught sight of a sleek, crystalline shuttle waiting to take him to a planet he'd never intended to set foot on. His last glimpse of the station concourse showed Lyra being whisked away by another security detail, her silver robes disappearing into the crowd. So much for no complications, Jake muttered as the shuttle doors sealed behind him. The descent to Xylos was both breathtaking and surreal. As the shuttle broke through the upper atmosphere, Jake pressed his face against the viewport, momentarily forgetting his predicament. The landscape below seemed to be alive with light, vast crystalline formations rising like mountains, intertwined with what appeared to be bioluminescent vegetation. Cities floated on massive anti-gravity platforms, connected by bridges of light that pulsed with traffic. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly intimidating. The shuttle banked toward a particularly large floating structure, an intricate complex of crystal spires and suspended gardens that seemed to be arranged in a pattern reminiscent of a seven-pointed star. Valor Estate, announced the pilot, speaking for the first time since departure. Prepare for landing. Jake was escorted through a series of increasingly elaborate corridors, each one making him more aware of his scuffed boots and worn salvager's attire. The walls themselves seemed to be alive with subtle pulses of light, responding to the movements of the Xylan guards around him. The air felt charged, tingling against his skin with an almost imperceptible vibration that made him acutely aware of his alien physiology. Finally, they arrived at a vast circular chamber. The ceiling arched high overhead, a dome of what appeared to be living crystal that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. At the center of the room stood a raised dais surrounded by 7 crystalline chairs arranged in a semicircle. 6 of the chairs were occupied. Jake swallowed hard as he was led to the center of the dais. Each of the women seated before him shared the distinctive features of the Velour lineage: the pale violet skin, the silver-flecked eyes, the regal bearing, but the similarities ended there. Their expressions ranged from cold scrutiny to barely concealed hostility, with a few unreadable gazes in between. "The human, Jake Riley," announced one of the guards before retreating. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Jake fought the urge to fidget under their collective gaze. Finally, the woman in the central chair rose. Her robes were the deepest shade of indigo, adorned with intricate silver patterns that seemed to move subtly in the light. Her hair, unlike Lyra's flowing silver locks, was styled in a severe geometric cut that emphasized her sharp features. "I am Cara Velour," she stated, her tone as cold and precise as a surgical instrument. "First daughter and head of the Velour lineage." She gestured to each of her sisters in turn. "Valna Velour, second daughter and commander of our security forces." The woman to her immediate right nodded curtly. Her muscular frame was evident even beneath her formal attire, and a scar traced a line from her right temple to her jaw. Her eyes assessed Jake with the calculating gaze of a predator. "Zella Velour, third daughter and lead researcher of core dynamics." A slender woman with a data tablet already in hand adjusted her spectacles, which seemed to be made of some crystalline material. She was openly scanning Jake with a device, mumbling notations to herself. "Coria Velour, fourth daughter and diplomatic liaison." A woman with an elegant bearing offered a perfectly composed smile that never reached her eyes. Her robes were the most elaborate of the group, adorned with symbols Jake recognized from various interplanetary treaties. "Nyla Velour, fifth daughter and core priestess." The woman who barely inclined her head sat furthest from the center. Her robes were simple but radiated a subtle luminescence. She seemed to be looking through Jake rather than at him, her gaze distant yet somehow deeply invasive. "Alara Velour, sixth daughter and cultural chronicler." A woman with wildly arranged silver hair and robes adorned with what appeared to be moving artwork clapped her hands delightedly. She was already sketching Jake's likeness in midair, where it hung as a glowing outline. "And you have already met Lyra, our seventh and youngest." Jake turned to see Lyra enter the chamber from another entrance. She had changed into formal attire similar to her sisters, though her robes held more silver than purple. Her expression was a mixture of apology and concern as she took the final seat. "The Velour lineage," Kyra continued, "has served as guardians of the Nexus core for 17 generations. The core is the heart of Xylos, a consciousness and power source as old as our civilization itself. It maintains the equilibrium of our world and provides the energy for our advancement." She gestured toward a central holographic display that materialized between them, showing a pulsing, crystalline structure nested within what appeared to be a massive cavern. Recently, the Cthar Syndicate has increased their efforts to seize or destabilize the core. The attempt to abduct Lyra was the latest in a series of escalating threats. Kyra's gaze hardened as she focused on Jake. "While your interference was helpful, the activation of the gratitude seal has created a complicated situation. By ancient law, designed to protect the core guardian lineages from fragmentation, you are now bound to marry all unbetrothed daughters of our house." "All of you?" Jake blurted out, unable to contain his disbelief. That's 7 marriages." "Correct," Kyra replied impassively. "Our family resonance matrix, which focuses our combined energies to protect and interact with the core, requires unity. The law exists to prevent division through scattered marriages." "And you actually enforce this?" Jake asked incredulously. "It hasn't been invoked in 3 generations," Coria interjected smoothly. "But the law remains absolute." Valna stood abruptly, her hand resting on what Jake assumed was a weapon at her belt. "This is absurd. A weak off-worlder with no connection to the core or understanding of our ways cannot possibly serve as a resonance amplifier. He will endanger everything we protect." "I concur with Valna's assessment," Zella added, not looking up from her readings. His bioelectric field shows standard human parameters, no indication of core compatibility. Though his physiological stress responses are interesting. She made another notation. Perhaps we could arrange a diplomatic exception, Coria suggested, though her tone indicated she was already calculating potential political advantages. With proper concessions from Earth authorities, of course. The legal bindings are clear, Kyra stated. Without the unified resonance matrix, our protection of the core weakens. The Kthar would certainly exploit any such vulnerability. Oh, but the symmetry is exquisite, Alara exclaimed, her hands dancing through the air as she expanded her sketch to include all 7 sisters around Jake. The foreigner drawn by cosmic chance into our ancestral duty. It's the perfect narrative structure. Nyla, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but carried a weight that silenced even Valna. The core pulses differently since the seal was activated. It acknowledges the human. All eyes turned to her in surprise, then back to Jake with renewed interest. Look, Jake said, seizing the momentary pause. I understand you have your traditions and duties, but I'm a salvage operator from Earth. I have a ship that needs repairs, contracts that need fulfilling. I can't just become part of a septuple marriage to protect some crystal power source I've never heard of until today. You have no choice, Kyra stated flatly. The law binds you as surely as it binds us. Attempts to leave Xylos without fulfilling the covenant would trigger interplanetary sanctions against Earth shipping, beginning with the impounding of your vessel. Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. His ship was everything, his home, his livelihood, his freedom. This is kidnapping, he said through gritted teeth. This is Xylan law, Kyra corrected. You will be given quarters and begin the integration protocol tomorrow. Each of my sisters will instruct you in their respective domains of core protection. You will learn your place in the resonance matrix. Before Jake could protest further, Lyra stood and approached him. I truly am sorry, she said quietly. I acted on instinct. The seal is so ingrained in our customs. But perhaps there is a purpose in this chance encounter. The core often works in patterns we cannot immediately recognize. Her genuine remorse softened Jake's anger, though not his determination to find a way out of this situation. He looked around at the 6 other faces regarding him with emotions ranging from hostility to clinical curiosity to theatrical interest. Your integration begins at first light, Kyra declared, rising from her chair. Until then, you will be escorted to the guest quarters in the East Wing. As Jake was led away by silent guards, he caught a final glimpse of the 7 sisters. Valna was arguing heatedly with Kyra. Zella had returned to her measurements. Coria was already consulting what appeared to be legal documents. Nyla had closed her eyes in silent meditation. Alara was excitedly expanding her artwork, and Lyra was watching him go, concern evident in her silver-flecked eyes. Some vacation this turned out to be, Jake muttered to himself as the crystal doors sealed behind him. The next morning began earlier than Jake would have liked, with a Xylan attendant practically vibrating with nervous energy as he laid out what appeared to be ceremonial attire. The integration protocol requires appropriate symbolic alignment, the attendant explained, gesturing to the indigo and silver garments. The first phase begins with Commander Valna. Of course it does, Jake sighed, eyeing the outfit with suspicion. It was surprisingly comfortable once donned, fitting perfectly despite never having been measured for it. The material seemed to adjust itself to his form, maintaining a pleasant temperature despite the cooler air of the Velour state. Valna was waiting in what appeared to be a training arena, a vast circular space with various weapon racks and obstacle courses that seemed to defy gravity itself. She had forsaken formal robes for a fitted combat uniform that emphasized her athletic build. Human, she acknowledged curtly. You claim to have protected my sister. Let's see what battle skills you possess. Without further warning, she tossed him what appeared to be a staff made of a lightweight crystalline material. Jake caught it reflexively, surprised by its perfect balance. Simulation Sequence Alpha, Valna commanded. The arena around them shimmered, and suddenly Jake found himself standing in what appeared to be a recreation of the station corridor, where he'd met Lyra, complete with holographic assailants. "Show me exactly how you intervened," Valna demanded, crossing her arms. Jake hesitated, then walked through the encounter, the distraction, the maintenance drone, the escape route. Rather than using the staff as a weapon, he demonstrated how he'd use the environment and surprise to their advantage. Valna's expression remained stone-like. "Again, but this time, they're ready for you." The simulation reset, but now the Kthar agents were more numerous and alert. Jake found himself truly fighting this time, using the staff to deflect attacks while still trying to reach the holographic Lyra. He took several hits, but managed to complete the objective. "Pathetic," Valna stated. "A child could have done better. How do you expect to protect a core Guardian lineage with such limited combat abilities?" Jake wiped sweat from his brow. "I don't. I'm a salvager, not a warrior. But sometimes thinking quickly works better than fighting well." "Prove it," she challenged, and the simulation changed again. This time, they were in what appeared to be a space battle. Jake at the controls of a simulated ship not unlike his own, facing a Kthar raiding vessel trying to intercept a Xylan transport. Here, Jake's experience showed. He navigated the asteroid field with precise maneuvers, using the environment to his advantage rather than engaging in direct combat. He disabled the Kthar vessel by luring it into a gravitational eddy, then executed a daring rescue of the transport. When the simulation ended, Valna's expression had shifted from dismissal to grudging. "Reassessment. You have unexpected aptitudes," she conceded, "though your hand-to-hand combat requires significant improvement." Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Valna's posture instantly shifted to high alert as she pressed a crystal communicator at her wrist. "Perimeter breach, Sector 7, a voice reported. Kthar's signatures detected. Secure the human," Valna ordered, drawing what appeared to be an energy weapon from her belt. "I will." The far wall of the training arena exploded inward. Through the crystalline debris stepped three figures in dark armor, similar to the assailants from the station, but more heavily equipped. "Down!" Valna shouted, pushing Jake aside as energy blasts scorched the air where they had been standing. The next moments were chaos. Valna engaged two of the intruders with impressive skill, her weapon and body moving in a synchronized dance of combat. The third attacker, however, circled toward Jake. Acting on instinct, Jake rolled toward one of the training drones, activating it and programming a simple evasion pattern. As the drone zigzagged across the arena, it drew the attacker's fire. Jake used the distraction to flank the Kthar agent, striking with his staff at the back of the knees, a universal weak point regardless of species. The attacker stumbled, and Jake followed with a blow to the helmet, cracking the visor. When the Kthar turned, Jake was startled to see not a face, but a mass of writhing tendrils behind the damaged mask. "Neural interface parasite," Valna called from across the room as she disabled her second opponent. "Don't let it touch you." Jake narrowly avoided the tendrils that lashed out from the broken visor. He backed away, looking for another avenue of attack, when his shoulder bumped against a weapons rack. Among the exotic armaments was what appeared to be a simple canister. The label was in Xylan script, but the universal symbol for cold was unmistakable. Grabbing the canister, Jake sprayed its contents at the approaching parasite host. The creature shrieked as frost formed instantly across its armor, and the tendrils emerging from the visor stiffened and crystallized. Valna appeared beside him, finishing the job with a precise strike that shattered the frozen tendrils and knocked the host unconscious. For a moment, they stood side by side, breathing heavily. Quick thinking, Valna acknowledged a new note in her voice. If not respect, then at least a reduction in contempt. That was cryogenic suspension spray for training injuries. "Figured cold and squishy things don't mix well?" Jake shrugged, trying to hide how rattled he felt. "Are these attacks common?" "They're becoming more frequent," Valna admitted, securing restraints around the fallen Kthar agents. "Which is why we cannot afford weakness in the Vialor lineage." She fixed him with a penetrating gaze. "I still consider you inadequate as a resonance amplifier, but perhaps you are not entirely useless." Coming from Valna, Jake suspected this was high praise indeed. Security personnel flooded the arena, taking custody of the attackers. As Jake was escorted to his next integration session, he realized with unease that the Cathar had specifically targeted the area where he was training. This was no random attack. Somehow, they knew about him and considered him important enough to eliminate. His concerns were hardly alleviated when he was brought to Zella's laboratory, a vast chamber filled with equipment both recognizable and utterly alien. Holographic displays showed data streams that reorganized themselves constantly, and at the center was a smaller version of the core display he'd seen in the audience chamber. Fascinating, Zella murmured as he entered, not bothering to look up from her instruments. Your involvement in repelling the Cathar agents shows unexpected adaptability. It confirms certain anomalous readings I detected yesterday. What anomalous readings? Jake asked warily. Your bioelectric field, Zella replied, finally turning to face him. Her eyes, magnified slightly by her crystal spectacles, had a disconcerting intensity. It doesn't conform to standard human parameters from our database. There are harmonic resonances I cannot account for. She gestured for him to sit on what appeared to be an examination table. Various instruments automatically oriented toward him, scanning with beams of colored light. I need to understand how a non-Xylan could potentially function in a resonance matrix, she continued. It's unprecedented. The core itself has never accepted off-world energy signatures before. For the next few hours, Jake was subjected to a battery of tests that ranged from merely uncomfortable to borderline painful. Zella took samples of hair, skin, and blood, measured his responses to various energy frequencies, and had him recite what seemed like nonsensical phrases in Xylan language while monitoring his brainwave patterns. Throughout it all, she maintained a running commentary that seemed directed more at her recording devices than at Jake himself. Subject shows 32% higher neuroplasticity than median human baseline. Unusual mitochondrial energy production. Harmonic response to core frequency stimuli unexpected. Can you explain any of this in terms I might actually understand? Jake finally interrupted as she examined a holographic representation of what he assumed was his nervous system. Zella blinked, as if suddenly remembering he was a person and not just a specimen. You are anomalous, she said after a moment. Your physiology contains patterns that should not exist in a human. They bear similarities to certain Xylan resonance structures, particularly those found in core guardian lineages. And that means, I don't know yet, she admitted, sounding annoyed at having to acknowledge uncertainty. But it might explain why the core responded to your presence, according to Nyla, and why the Cathar seemed particularly interested in eliminating you. She adjusted her spectacles. Tell me about your parents, your ancestry. Jake shrugged. Not much to tell. Orphaned young, raised in Earth's orbital colonies. Never knew my parents. Standard story for a lot of space salvagers. Zella made another notation. Convenient. The lack of genetic history makes it difficult to trace the source of these anomalies. She hesitated, then added almost reluctantly, but they might make you somewhat less unsuitable for the resonance matrix than initially calculated. Before Jake could press for more information, the laboratory door slid open to reveal Korea, resplendent in diplomatic finery. I believe our brother-to-be has endured enough scientific prodding for one day, she said smoothly. The Paxillian ambassador has requested a formal introduction to our unique situation. Zella frowned. My analysis is incomplete. As is diplomatic protocol, Korea countered firmly. The human needs to be properly presented before rumors spread further. Jake found himself escorted from the laboratory to an adjoining chamber, where attendants quickly replaced his simple garments with more elaborate formal attire. As they worked, Korea briefed him. The Paxillians are key allies in restraining Cathar expansion, she explained. Their understanding of our situation is crucial. You will speak only when directly addressed, defer to me in all matters of policy, and maintain a dignified bearing befitting a Vilor consort. I'm not actually a consort yet, Jake pointed out. and I'm still looking for a way out of this arrangement. Coria's pleasant expression didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. For the next 2 hours, you most certainly are a Vialor consort. The stability of an interplanetary alliance may depend on it. The diplomatic reception was held in a crystal-domed garden filled with bioluminescent flora and representatives from various worlds. Jake found himself the center of unwanted attention as Coria introduced him to a succession of ambassadors and officials. The Paxilian ambassador, a tall, insectoid being with multifaceted eyes, seemed particularly interested. Most unusual to incorporate non-Xylan genetics into a core guardian lineage, the ambassador chittered. One wonders about the implications. The Vialor lineage embraces the cosmic symmetry of this unexpected union, Coria replied smoothly. The gratitude seal has never failed to identify appropriate resonance patterns. Indeed, the ambassador responded, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. And what does the human envoy think of his new responsibilities? All eyes turned to Jake. Coria's warning glance was clear. I'm still learning about the honor that's been bestowed upon me, Jake said carefully. The Vialor legacy of protecting the core is impressive. Diplomatic indeed, the ambassador observed. Yet one hears whispers that the Cathar Syndicate is most displeased by this development. Their attacks grow bolder. The Cathar have always coveted what they cannot understand, Coria replied dismissively. The Vialor lineage has protected the core through greater threats than their petty ambitions. The conversation continued in this vein, a delicate dance of words, where actual meaning seemed to lurk beneath layers of formality. Jake did his best to follow Coria's lead, increasingly aware that there were political dimensions to a situation he'd never considered. As the reception concluded, Coria surprised him by offering what appeared to be genuine approval. You adapted well, she acknowledged. The Paxilians were testing whether you could be manipulated against Xylan interests. And did I pass? Jake asked wryly. You didn't fail catastrophically, she replied with the ghost of a smile, which, for human thrust into interplanetary politics, is quite remarkable. She hesitated, then added, the Cathar influence grows. They spread rumors that your presence will destabilize the core. Some of our more conservative allies believe them. Why would they care about me specifically? Jake asked, the unease he'd felt since the morning attack growing stronger. That, Coria said thoughtfully, is the question Zella's tests were trying to answer. And why Nyla has requested to see you next. The core priestess waited for Jake in what appeared to be a meditation chamber. Unlike the grandeur of the diplomatic hall or the clinical precision of Zella's laboratory, this space was stark in its simplicity. The only furnishings were 7 crystalline pedestals arranged in a circle around a small replica of the Nexus core, pulsing with gentle blue light. Nyla herself seemed almost part of the chamber, her stillness so complete that Jake started slightly when she finally spoke. You bear patterns, she said, her voice soft but reaching him clearly. Ancient patterns that should not exist in one not born of Xylos. So I've been told, Jake replied, though no one seems able to explain why. Approach the resonance model, Nyla instructed, indicating the core replica. Place your hands upon it. Jake hesitated. Is that safe? That depends, Nyla said cryptically, on what you truly are. With reluctance, Jake stepped forward and placed his palms on the crystalline surface of the model. Initially, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the pulsing light within the crystal synchronized with his heartbeat. A warm sensation spread up his arms, not unpleasant but strange, as though something were gently probing his consciousness. Images flashed through his mind, stars seen from unfamiliar perspectives, crystalline cities far more ancient than the current Xylan structures, faces of people he'd never met yet somehow recognized. The sensations were overwhelming but not chaotic. There was a pattern to them, a purpose he couldn't quite grasp. Just as the experience began to intensify beyond comfort, Nyla placed her hand atop his, breaking the connection. Jake stumbled back, disoriented. What? What was that? He gasped. Nyla's expression remained serene, but her eyes held a new awareness as she regarded him. "The core recognized you," she said simply. "It showed you fragments of its memory." "Why would it do that?" Jake demanded, still trying to process the flood of alien images. "The core preserves the collective memory and essence of Xylos," Nyla explained. "It rarely communicates directly with any but the most attuned priests. Yet it reached for you, an outsider." She studied him with that penetrating gaze. "There is something within you, a pattern, a resonance, that echoes the ancient harmonies of the core itself. I do not yet understand how this is possible, but I cannot deny what I have witnessed." "So what does this mean for me?" Jake asked, unsettled by her words. "It means," Nyla said softly, "that perhaps the gratitude seal was not merely chance. The core works through patterns beyond our comprehension. You are here for a purpose, Jake Riley of Earth." The mystical implications of her statement did little to comfort Jake as he was escorted to his next integration session. His head still swam with the alien memories the core had shared, and questions multiplied with each new interaction. Alera's domain proved to be a welcome contrast to Nyla's austere meditation chamber. The cultural chronicler had transformed a vast gallery into what appeared to be a working studio, with artworks in various stages of completion surrounding a central platform. "The human arrives," she exclaimed with theatrical enthusiasm. "The stranger drawn across the stars to our ancestral duty. The unlikely consort of seven. What a magnificent narrative arc." Unlike her sisters, Alera made no attempt at formal distance. She circled Jake with unbridled curiosity, occasionally stopping to make rapid sketches or adjustments to a larger work that appeared to be a stylized representation of his arrival. "You must tell me everything," she insisted, guiding him to a comfortable seating area surrounded by what appeared to be recording crystals. "Your life before Xylos, your impressions of our world, your emotional response to each of my sisters. Every detail shapes the chronicle." "The chronicle?" Jake asked, somewhat overwhelmed by her energy. "Yes, the living record of Eolor lineage history," Alera explained, gesturing expansively. "Every core guardian family maintains one. Part art, part historical document, part predictive model. We preserve not just events, but their emotional and energetic resonances." Despite his wariness, Jake found Alera's enthusiasm infectious. Her questions were probing, but asked with such genuine interest that he found himself sharing more than he'd intended. His lonely childhood in the orbital colonies, his years working salvage on the edges of settled space, his dreams of eventually earning enough to purchase a small outpost of his own. What began as a wary interview gradually transformed into something approaching a genuine conversation. Alera, for all her dramatic flair, proved to be an insightful listener, finding patterns in his scattered experiences that even Jake had never recognized. "You've been searching," she observed, adding touches to a holographic sculpture that had taken shape as they talked. "Not just for salvage, but for connection, for belonging." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I'm doing fine on my own." "Of course you are," Alera agreed, her hands never ceasing their artistic manipulations. "But the universe has patterns, Jake Riley. Lone stars exist, but they are rare. Most form systems, clusters, galaxies, interconnected and stronger for it." She stepped back to reveal the completed sculpture, a striking representation of Jake standing at the helm of a ship, but with ghostly crystalline threads connecting him to distant points of light. "Your story was already intertwined with Xylos," she said softly. "The seal merely made visible what was already forming." Before Jake could argue this mystical interpretation, a gentle chime sounded. Lyra appeared at the entrance to the gallery, her silver-violet eyes finding Jake immediately. "I hope my sister hasn't exhausted you with her artistic extractions," she said with a small smile. Alera tends to lose track of time when crafting a narrative. "Time is a construct imposed upon art," Alera declared dramatically, but relinquished her hold on Jake's attention with good grace. "We shall continue the chronicle another day, human consort." As they walked together through the crystalline corridors of the Vealor estate, Jake found himself studying Lyra more carefully. Unlike that first panicked meeting on the station or the formal introduction in the audience chamber, she seemed more relaxed now, though a certain tension remained in her posture. "I'm sorry about all of this," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I never meant to trap you in our laws and traditions." "I know," Jake replied, surprised to find he genuinely believed her. "Though I'm still planning to find a way out of here eventually." Lyra nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Of course. No one expects you to actually." She trailed off, and Jake found himself oddly reluctant to complete the thought. "Your sisters are intense," he offered instead. This drew a laugh from Lyra, a musical sound that seemed to ripple through the air around them. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Kyra carries the weight of leadership, Valna the responsibility of protection, Zella seeks understanding through science, Korea through politics, Nyla through spirituality, and Alara through art. And you?" Jake asked, "What's your role in this family dynamic?" "I'm still finding it," Lyra admitted. "As the seventh daughter, I'm expected to embody harmony, to balance the attributes of all my sisters. But I've always felt different, more drawn to the world beyond Xylos." They had arrived at a balcony overlooking the extraordinary landscape of the planet. The twins' suns were setting, casting the crystalline formations in hues of amber and violet. Below them, the city lights began to shimmer like earthbound stars. "It's beautiful," Jake acknowledged, "in an alien way." "I've always wondered how Earth looks," Lyra said wistfully. "The blue oceans, the green forests, they sound like fantasy to someone raised among crystals and energy fields." Something in her longing resonated with Jake's own restlessness. "Maybe someday you'll see it," he said, surprising himself with the genuineness of the offer. Before Lyra could respond, Kyra's voice came from behind them. "It's time," she said without preamble. "The first phase of integration is complete." Jake turned to find not just Kyra, but all 6 of the other sisters arrayed behind her, each with a different expression: assessment from Valna, curiosity from Zella, calculation from Korea, serene observation from Nyla, dramatic anticipation from Alara, and concern from Lyra. "Time for what?" Jake asked warily. "Your formal presentation to the core," Kyra replied. "Your responses to each integration session have been unexpected. The core itself must now evaluate your suitability. And if I'm found unsuitable," Jake ventured. Kyra's expression remained impassive. "Then alternatives will be considered." "Cool. The journey to the Nexus core took them deep beneath the floating city, through ancient crystalline tunnels that predated the current Xylan civilization. Jake felt the air grow increasingly charged with energy as they descended, the same tingling sensation he'd experienced with the model in Nyla's chamber, but magnified 100-fold. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern that seemed to dwarf even the grandest chambers of the Valor estate. At its center floated the Nexus core itself, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with blue-white energy. Unlike the holographic representations Jake had seen, the actual core seemed alive, its light shifting and flowing in patterns that evoked conscious thought. Arranged around the core were 7 crystalline platforms, each inscribed with symbols that Jake recognized from the Vialor insignia. The sisters moved to take their places, one upon each platform, forming a perfect circle around the core. "The resonance matrix," Kyra explained. "Through our combined energies, we maintain the stability of the core and channel its power to sustain Xylos." "And where do I fit into this arrangement?" Jake asked, noting there was no 8th platform. "That," said Kyra, "is what we are here to determine." At some unspoken signal, the 7 sisters closed their eyes. The air in the cavern grew heavy with energy as each began to glow with a distinctive aura. Kyra's a deep indigo, Valna's a fierce crimson, Zella's an analytical amber, Coria's a diplomatic silver, Nyla's a spiritual white, Alara's a creative violet, and Lyra's a harmonizing gold. The energies extended from each sister, flowing toward the core in streams of light that connected and intertwined. The core itself began to pulse more rapidly, its light intensifying until Jake had to shield his eyes. Then, Without warning, a tendril of pure white energy extended from the core directly toward him. Jake instinctively stepped back, but the energy followed, enveloping him in a cocoon of light. The sensation was similar to touching the model in Nyla's chamber, but exponentially more powerful. His consciousness expanded, connecting with the alien memories he'd glimpsed before, but now with greater clarity. He saw the ancient founding of Xylos, the discovery of the core, the formation of the guardian lineages. He felt the subtle energy that flowed through all living things on the planet, binding them in a complex harmony. More disturbing were the images of the Cthar, not just as they appeared now, but their evolution from a species consumed by a parasitic intelligence that fed on energy patterns, seeking always to absorb and control rather than harmonize. Through it all ran a thread of recognition, as though the core were searching for something specific within Jake, some pattern or resonance it knew but couldn't quite place. Just as the experience threatened to overwhelm his human consciousness, the energy receded, returning to the core. Jake felt his knees, gasping for breath. When he looked up, he found all 7 sisters staring at him with varying degrees of shock. "Impossible," Valna whispered. "Fascinating," breathed Zella. "Unprecedented," murmured Korea. "Prophesied," Nyla stated with quiet certainty. "Magnificent," exclaimed Alara. "I knew it," Lyra said softly. Kyra alone remained silent, her expression unreadable as she stepped down from her platform and approached Jake. "The core has recognized you," she finally said. "Not merely as compatible, but as essential. Your energy signature contains patterns thought lost millennia ago, from the first Guardian, who discovered the core and established the protection protocols." "That's not possible," Jake argued, still disoriented from the experience. "I'm human, from Earth." "Your biological form is human," Zella corrected, joining her sister. "But your energy pattern, it's as though someone embedded a Xylan Guardian template into human DNA. The probability of such an occurrence naturally is infinitesimal." "Are you saying I'm not human?" Jake demanded, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "You are human," Kyra clarified, "but you carry something within you that is unmistakably of Xylos, of the core itself. The question is how this came to be." Before further discussion could unfold, a deafening alarm echoed through the cavern. Valna's communicator activated, projecting a holographic image of a VA lore security officer. "Commander, multiple Cthar vessels have breached our outer defenses," the officer reported urgently. "They're targeting the core access points. Evacuate non-essential personnel and activate the secondary shields," Valna ordered. "We're coming up." She turned to her sisters. "They knew we would bring him to the core. This was their plan all along, to strike when our attention was divided. Or when we discovered what he truly is," Kyra countered grimly. "The resonance ceremony must proceed immediately. It's our only chance to establish a stable matrix before they reach the core." "The ceremony?" Lyra's eyes widened. "But that requires complete acceptance and harmonization," Kyra finished. "From all participants." All eyes turned to Jake. "What exactly does this ceremony entail?" he asked, though the intensity of their gazes already suggested the answer would be significant. "The formal completion of the bond initiated by the gratitude seal," Kyra explained. "A permanent linking of your energy pattern with the VA lore resonance matrix, allowing us to channel the core's power at its fullest potential. It would make you truly one of us, bound to all 7 sisters, bound to the core, bound to Xylos itself." "That sounds permanent," Jake said carefully. "It is," Kyra confirmed without apology. "The choice is yours, Jake Riley. But know that without the completed matrix, our defense against the Cthar will likely fail. The core will fall, and Xylos with it. Above them, they could hear the sounds of battle. Energy weapons discharging, shields straining against assault. Time was running out. Jake looked at each of the sisters in turn. Kyra's commanding presence, Valna's fierce determination, Zella's analytical focus, Coria's diplomatic poise, Nyla's spiritual certainty, Ilara's creative passion, and finally Lyra's hopeful gaze. A week ago, he'd been a lone salvager drifting through space, disconnected from everything but his ship and the next contract. Now, inexplicably, he stood at the center of a conflict that threatened an entire world, a world that, against all logic, seemed to have some ancient claim on him. "If I do this," Jake said slowly, "what happens to me? To who I am?" "You remain yourself," Nyla answered, "but expanded, connected, part of something greater. And my ship, my freedom to leave." "The bond would draw you back to Xylos periodically," Kyra admitted. "But between those times, you would be free to travel. Your ship would be repaired and enhanced with Xylan technology." Another explosion, closer this time, rocked the cavern. Dust and crystal shards rained from the ceiling. "They've breached the upper defenses," Valna reported grimly. "We have minutes at most." Jake closed his eyes, weighing impossible choices. The rational part of him screamed that this was madness. Binding himself permanently to 7 alien women and a crystalline consciousness to save a planet he'd never even heard of until days ago. Yet something deeper resonated with the choice. The same something that had recognized the ancient memories the Corps had shared, that had felt an inexplicable connection when he'd first set foot on Xylos. "All right," he said finally, opening his eyes. "I'll do it. Tell me what's needed." Relief washed across 7 violet faces, though Lyra's held a complexity of emotion that suggested she understood better than most what he was sacrificing. "Return to your positions," Kyra instructed her sisters, then turned to Jake. "You must stand at the center, directly before the Corps. Open your mind and heart fully. Any resistance will disrupt the harmonization." The sisters resumed their places on the 7 platforms, their auras beginning to glow once more. Jake stepped forward to stand between them and the pulsing Corps, feeling the energy build around him like an approaching storm. "Focus on each of us in turn," Nyla called to him. "Acknowledge the bond. Accept its meaning." Jake turned first to Kyra, meeting her indigo gaze. Her aura extended toward him, surrounding him with a sense of leadership, responsibility, and unyielding purpose. He accepted these aspects, feeling them resonate with his own determination. He turned to Valna, whose crimson aura conveyed protection, strength, and fierce loyalty. These two he accepted, recognizing the warrior's spirit that had driven him to intervene when he'd first seen Lyra in danger. Zella's amber energy brought understanding, analysis, and a quest for knowledge, qualities that had served him well in navigating the dangers of deep space salvage. Korea offered diplomacy, adaptability, and the skill to navigate complex social currents, tools he'd often lacked in his solitary existence, but now recognized the value of. Nyla's white aura carried spiritual connection, harmony with forces beyond oneself, and acceptance of mystery, concepts Jake had always struggled with but now began to comprehend. Ilara shared creativity, passion, and the power of narrative, reminding him that every life, even a salvager's, tells a story worth acknowledging. Finally, he turned to Lyra, whose golden energy embodied balance, compassion, and the courage to forge new paths. In her gaze, he found understanding and something more, a connection that transcended the mystical bonds being formed around them. As he accepted each aspect, the sisters' auras extended fully to him, intertwining around his form in a complex lattice of light. The core itself pulsed in response, extending tendrils of energy that wove through the latticework, binding them together. A profound shift occurred within Jake, not a loss of self, but an expansion. He remained Jake Riley, human salvager from Earth, but now also felt the presence of 7 distinct consciousnesses linked to his own, and beyond them, the vast, ancient awareness of the core itself. Through this expanded perception, he sensed the Kthar forces converging above, felt their parasitic hunger for the core's power, their determination to consume and control rather than harmonize. Now, Kyra's voice echoed both aloud and within his mind. Direct the energy upward, all of us together. Acting on instinct rather than instruction, Jake raised his hands toward the cavern ceiling. The combined energy of the resonance matrix flowed through him, amplified and directed by his unique connection to both human and Xylan patterns. A beam of blinding white light erupted from his palms, piercing through rock and crystal to strike at the invading forces above. Through the matrix bond, Jake experienced the devastation wrought upon the Cathar fleet. Their energy weapons neutralized, their neural parasites disrupted, their ships disabled by the harmonized power of the core. It wasn't destruction so much as nullification, a canceling of the disharmony they sought to impose. When the light finally faded, Jake fell to his knees, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. The bond with the sisters and the core remained, a subtle background presence rather than the overwhelming force it had been during the ceremony. "It is done," Kyra announced, her own voice weary but satisfied. "The resonance matrix is complete. The Cathar fleet has been neutralized." Jake looked down at his hands, surprised to see faint traces of violet energy still dancing across his skin. "I feel different." "You are different," Nyla confirmed, approaching him. "As are we all. The matrix has never included a non-Xylan before. The harmonics are evolved, enhanced," Zella corrected, already scanning the new energy patterns with evident fascination. "The human elements of your pattern have created resonance possibilities previously unattainable." Valna approached next, offering a warrior salute that would have been unthinkable days ago. "You fought well," she acknowledged. "The Cathar will think twice before attacking again. Though they will certainly try," Korea added pragmatically. "This development changes the political landscape considerably." "It changes everything," Alera exclaimed. "The chronicle must be completely rewritten. The human consort who transformed the Matrix. It has a magnificent ring to it." Through it all, Lyra remained slightly apart, her expression complex. When the others had finished their immediate assessments, she approached Jake, taking his hand in hers. The contact sent a ripple of golden energy between them, stronger than with the other sisters, a connection beyond the ceremonial bond. "You gave up your freedom for us," she said softly. "For Xylos." Jake considered this, feeling the new connections within him, the responsibilities but also the possibilities they represented. "I'm not sure I gave it up," he finally replied. "Maybe I just found a different kind of freedom." Kyra joined them, her usual stern expression softened slightly. "The matrix binding is complete, but the traditional ceremonies remain. By law and custom, you are now consort to the Vialor lineage, all 7 sisters. Though such arrangements typically allow for individual preference within the formal structure," Korea added with diplomatic precision, her gaze moving meaningfully between Jake and Lyra. "The human has shown particular resonance harmony with our youngest," Nyla observed serenely. "The narrative practically writes itself." Alera agreed enthusiastically. "The practical aspects can be addressed later," Valna cut in. "For now, we must secure the core and assess the damage above." As the sisters organized their respective responsibilities, Jake found himself standing beside Lyra at the edge of the core chamber, watching the interplay of personalities he was now permanently connected to. "Having second thoughts?" Lyra asked quietly. Jake considered the question honestly. "I should be," he admitted. "Everything's happened so fast. A week ago, I was just a salvager looking for a score. Now I'm bound to 7 alien women and a sentient crystal powering an entire civilization. And yet," Lyra prompted, sensing more. "And yet it feels right," Jake said, surprising himself with the realization. "Like some part of me recognized this place, these connections before I consciously knew them. Is that the core's influence?" "Perhaps," Lyra acknowledged. "Or perhaps some patterns in the universe exist across space and time, waiting to be reconnected." She hesitated, then added, "The formal bond links you to all my sisters, but the heart follows its own pattern. I would understand if—" Jake gently interrupted her by taking her hand, feeling again that unique resonance between them. "Some connections are stronger than others," he said simply. Above them, the sounds of reconstruction had already begun. The Cathar had been repelled, but not destroyed, challenges remained ahead. The mystery of Jake's Xylan energy pattern was still unsolved, promising discoveries that might reshape understanding of both human and Xylan history. But for now, standing in the ancient light of the Nexus core, with Lyra's hand in his, Jake Riley, former lonely salvager, now reluctant hero and consort to Seven Sisters, felt something he'd searched for across countless star systems without even knowing it. He felt home as the Seven Sisters gathered around him, their new resonance matrix humming with harmony and potential. Jake looked out at the crystalline beauty of Xylos with new eyes, not just as an alien world that had ensnared him through strange laws and cosmic chance, but as a place where he belonged in ways he was only beginning to understand. The accidental kiss that had started it all now seemed less like cosmic misfortune and more like destiny, or at least the beginning of a story far greater than one human salvager could have ever anticipated for himself.